Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be finally reviewing the Tevo Tornado 3D printer. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So in today's video, I thought I would record it in 4K since it would be more appropriate for 3D printing. So what I have here are a bunch of prints that I have done in the past few months, and we're going to be taking a look at all of them up close in this video, and talk about how my experience went with the printer, and overall, if I recommend this printer, and what are the ups and downs and whatnot. And just a heads up, I have been absolutely loving this printer, and I have actually enjoyed it more than the CR10 3D printers, and I'll explain why in just a bit. We have some wood filament, regular PLA filament, transparent filament, and hopefully in the next upcoming videos we'll be trying out ABS and flexible filament. And yeah, I'll leave links for everything in the description below for the filaments I've been using here. They're a mix of a bunch of different brands that are actually from China, from GearBest, and some of them, like the red right here, is from Amazon, which is the Amaze 3D brand that I've been absolutely loving as well. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with the largest print that I have here. Again, if you have any suggestions of things I should print and try on this printer, let me know in the description below, and hopefully we'll see it in the next video. And one more thing, for the slicer program, I used to use Cura, but now I actually use Idea Maker, and I have been enjoying it, and it has been an absolute blast using it. It looks great, it has a lot of function, it's free, it's full of features, and it's really easy to use, and I absolutely love it for that. And I'll try to leave my preset in the description below. In the beginning, I had two sets of settings. One was the old one, which had some problems here and there, and then I had my updated ones, and I will try to leave my updated settings in the description below. So this one right here was actually my first ever base or VOS mode 3D print, and I was able to do that because Idea Maker is just so awesome. You simply click one button, it will automatically do it for you, and it took no time to print this. Here's what it looks like on the inside. It's pretty damn clean, of course, just like what you expect. But overall, there's a ton of detail, and this was actually printed with my first set of settings, and the printer bed wasn't absolutely spot on when it came to calibration. So I do have a weak spot right in the middle here when you stretch this thing apart. It does hold water, no problem, until you get to this point right here where water will leak. And on the bottom, overall, it looks pretty good, and there's no potholes or anything. Was there any stringing? Just a tiny bit around this area right here. Nothing crazy, really. You can easily rub it with your fingers, and it'll just disappear. But overall, a really nice print. And I have done some more base mode prints, like we have in the back right there. So we have the wooden filament and two transparent filaments, and we're going to take a look at that next. So let's just quickly test out the structural strength of this thing. And you can see it's overall pretty good. So yeah, overall a pretty good print. Next up, we have the transparent filament, and here is what it looks like. So I'm going to have my hand behind this thing just so you guys can see what it looks like. It looks absolutely gorgeous. It looks like glass. It's shiny, and overall, it has been very nicely printed out. It's a low poly base, also printed in base mode, and overall, this was printed with my updated settings. There were no gaps or anything. Everything is simply solid, and there's a lot of structural strength, and this filament is absolutely awesome. And it was actually pretty cheap too. I'll leave links for it in the description below. I think it was around $30 or $35 for the 1 kilo of transparent filament. And here's what it looks like with light shining through it. It's pretty nice. And yes, it can hold water, and there was no stringing, of course, because it was in base mode. It just kept printing around itself. And here's what the bottom looks like. It's pretty nice and clean. And yeah, what can I say? It was a really clean, successful print in base mode using Idea Maker on the Tevo Tornado. Then after that one, I actually printed this one right here with the wooden filament, and also in base mode with the new settings that I had. The bottom looks absolutely nice and clean. If you ever see some white spots here, that's actually from the glue stick that I have used. I basically put one layer of glue stick over the center of the bed, and for the past few months, I actually haven't laid any new layers of glue stick because that same layer was working just fine. Here we did have some stringing here and there. That's something you notice with the wooden filament. You just gotta tweak your settings to get the best results. Even though this was in base mode, I did get some stringing, probably because of the complex structure here. But overall, pretty clean. Very solid, it can hold water, and here's a close-up of what it looks like. And if you try to burn this material, it'll actually burn just like wood, and it will smell like wood because I do believe it is PLA that's infused with wood particles or whatnot. This was also pretty cheap. I think you do get less than the usual amount, which is 1 kilogram. But again, links will be in the description below, and I think I'll put the prices around here in the video. Overall, it's a really nice material, and the printer had no problems printing it with my current set of settings. Structure-wise, very solid, and no problems over here. And right after that, I have printed the same model with the same settings using the transparent filament, where I actually had no stringing whatsoever, which is, again, pretty awesome. It's pretty clean. It's the same thing. You can see how transparent it is. 1 layer of thickness, and yeah, just absolutely love base mode now. with these kind of prints. Next up, here's some more transparent filament, and these were printed with the new settings, I believe. This 3D model of this little dragon actually had in-model supports that you had to break off, so you didn't have to manually put your own. They came with the model itself that you break off. And here's what it looks like around the wings. It's not perfect because I broke off the supports, but it's overall pretty clean. It's a transparent filament. I wouldn't recommend using the transparent filament for something like this unless you're going to be putting an LED inside of it or something like that. But yeah, overall it looks pretty good. And there's an example of what you can expect with, I believe, a 2mm thickness of wall and about 10% infill or so. So not really transparent anymore, more like white. Not so transparent. If this was printed in white, you'd have more detail that you can see. But yeah, I just started printing this out in transparent to see how it comes out. You can see some red here left from the previous red filament that I had. I tried to clean it up, but not all of it went away. Then we have this little kitty right here. I might throw an LED in there or something and make it glow. It looks pretty nice. Not really transparent anymore, but if you have a light source built into it, then it will definitely glow and it will look pretty damn awesome. And I might do that in a future video and give that a try. So, and as for the printing speed, I believe I had 30mm per second, which was not the fastest, but I did get the job done fairly nicely. Here's our last wooden filament print right here. You can see there's a lot of stringing. It kind of looks like a ghost ship or an old ship. You can definitely sand this down, add some varnish or whatever, or maybe some oils, throw a lighter on it, make it turn into a different color, and make it look like a true ghost ship. And just because it was printed in with wood filament, it does look pretty cool, but again, that's not what we're here for. We're here for clean results, so you can modify it yourself. This was printed with the original settings that I had at first. They weren't perfect, and as you have saw, the wooden filament does string up just a tiny bit here and there. This is actually a floating benchy. It's a bend benchy, and I'll try to find it again and leave a link for it in the description below. Alright, now let's move on and go ahead and take a look at something more colorful. This was printed with the same old settings, with the red Amaze 3D filament that I have used for the past year or so. Pretty much the same thing as the old benchy. It did have some stringing, but of course the wooden filament was more prone to stringing because it does have particles that you can see inside the actual filament roll. It's not a clean color. There are variants, which are again the wooden particles. Here's what it looked like side by side. A lot of detail on the inside. You can see that the wheel is right there, and let's see if we can zoom in even more on that. You can see that the tiny wheel right there, it's printed, and you can see the detail inside of it. So yes, this printer can print very fine details fairly well, and overall a pretty nice print. Just requires some tweaking here and there to eliminate the stringing. Next up, we have this 3D printing test model, which I have printed. And that's the first time I see something like this, and I decided to go ahead and print it. Unlike doing the benchies, we do have a benchy on hand here that I have printed out, but I thought this one would be more interesting. So basically, it has a ton of things that are going on here. It has some holes, smaller holes. I'll leave a link for this one in the description below. You can try it out with your printer if you do have one. These, of course, here will print pretty well, and there was no stringing inside. Here we have some cylinders at different sizes. The text looks clean over here. Here are some overhang angles that were printed out. So basically, this was printed with no supports whatsoever, and that's how far the printer can go until there's some overhang strings that you can see right there. And that started happening at the 80-degree mark. So it handled it pretty well. I mean, an 80-degree angle, that's pretty steep. And here we have some bridging tests. And you can see that pretty much all the bridges were successfully printed. But of course, if we take a closer look right here, you can see some stringing hanging down from those bridges. See if I can get a better focus point right here. And here's what some squares are supposed to look like when printed right up. So you can see that it's not perfect. You can see that there's some variation right here. And that's kind of a trend when it comes to printing something straight up with this printer. When it comes to something like a square. When printing a cylinder, it prints it fairly well, and there weren't any problems with that. So again, here's what it looks like. Hopefully you can see all of them pretty well. Everything printed fairly nicely. And yeah, I think I'm liking this a lot. I'm going to be printing this more often with other 3D printers and other filaments in the future. Moving on to the black filament, and here's one of the first prints that I have done on this printer. I believe this was printed with around 75% infill, could be 100. I am actually not too sure, but it is pretty weighty. And overall, I have been very impressed with this print. It feels really solid in the hand. It feels like a statue because it's so heavy and there's so much material. Again, it was accidental. But here is a closer look at what it looks like. So there are some jagged lines here and there. Overall, from far away, it looks pretty nice. But close up, you can definitely see the jagged edges here and there, which I can polish with a file or a wet sandpaper and clean it up. But yeah, that's what that looks like. And then once again, here we have a rocket that's also printed with the first set of settings that I had. A lot of overhang right here. Not really clean at all. and that's partly because I haven't printed proper supports with this model right here. So that is to be expected, but that's what that looks like. I did also scale it down, I believe. Here's what the top of the nozzle looks like. It's not absolutely perfect, but again, it was with the first set of settings that I had. After I slowed down the printing speed, I got much better results. Here's a cube that I also printed with the first set of settings. Again, you can see this trend here. It's supposed to be a clean cube, but not really clean. A lot of jagged edges, a lot of gaps here and there, and yeah. Moving on to something more colorful, here we have a banana for scale. Originally I printed this to use it as a scale in my videos, but in actuality it's a banana slicer. You take the banana out of the peel, you place it on a plate, a flat plate or something like that, you pop this on top, and you instantly get yourself a nicely sized piece of banana instantly. Of course you gotta clean it up afterwards, but hey, it's a really nice cool banana slicer. It looks pretty awesome, and yeah, very solid. These pieces are absolutely fantastic. It was overall a really nice clean print, as you guys can see, and I absolutely love this piece right here. Overall, everything is clean, and yeah, moving on. Next up, we have a tank, and it's not the best print. I believe I did scale it down to same some filament, and I think it was printed like this with some supports. Not the cleanest print, but it did work out fairly well. It looks pretty clean. If I print this and scale it up and tweak some settings here and there, I'd probably get a better print. But overall, I'm very impressed with the details right here. You can see there's a lot of detail. As you can see, the trend as before, that's actually broken and I glued it back on, but the nozzle here isn't very clean. It's there's a lot of variation in it. It's very jagged, so it's not very smooth. If this was more smooth, I think this model will look much better. And here's a close-up of the model, so that's what that looks like. And here's the last yellow print that I have done. This was supposed to be a Mario box, which is also a piggy bank, so you can store your money inside of it. It's a little cover right here that you can print separately. But overall, it looks pretty clean. Here's a close-up of what it looks like. Overall, not too bad. But yeah, that is what you can expect from something like this. It's not too shabby. Alright, and finally we can move on to my favorite filament, and that would be the green one right here. I haven't printed much actually with it because I'm kind of running out. If you have watched my previous videos, you'd notice that I really like this filament. Here's an actual benchy, unlike that floating benchy we have taken a look at just for measures. Here's what they look like side by side. This one's supposed to float on water. I actually haven't tested it yet. Maybe we'll test that at the end of this video. Here's a close-up of what that looks like. A lot of jagged edges here and there. I should really tweak my settings to fix this up, but it's not very clean compared to the CR10. Now, if you're wondering how it compares to the original CR10, this isn't actually very clean. The CR10 prints much cleaner prints overall, even with the same filament right here, and I know this roll is actually a really good roll that I have. In some cases, the printer just doesn't print things properly. And here's an example of one of them. You can see there are actually some bubbles right here, which is something that I have actually never seen printed on a benchy before. So a lot of problems going on with this benchy. I don't know exactly what's going on. If you do, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try to fix it in the test video where I compare both printers, where I'll try to fix up the settings and tweak them to make them better, and then we can reprint this model and see how it looks like. Moving on, here's a whistle that actually works, and I'm not going to blow it. Again, it's not perfect, but this model overall, I can never get it to print perfectly, but it does work. And finally, my favorite, cleanest print out of the bunch here is this lemon squeezer for your water bottle. So you can actually take your water bottle, and it supports most standard water bottles out there in the world. And I did test it with a few, and it does actually screw on very nicely and very tight. You can take your lemon and squeeze it in, and you got yourself a lemon juicer. Of course, with something like this, the lemon seeds are going to definitely seep into your water bottle unless you put some kind of filter right down here. But it does work. Overall, it looks pretty clean. But again, if we take a closer look right here, you can see that the lines aren't very clean. And I believe if I go ahead and print this on the CR10, I would get much better results. But overall, the printing experience was very enjoyable on this printer. I mean, it's not bad if this is your first 3D printer, because it is really easy to get started and there aren't much problems that you'd get like you would get on the CR10 printers, and I've had a bunch of them, and just to get started and get them working, it's a big hassle. And now for the last thing that I have printed right here is with this blue filament that I had laying around. Now, originally I thought this was a bad roll, but it seems like it is working fine for the prototyping of my next project. Basically, if you have been following me on this channel, I have mentioned this a couple times. I am building a computer inside an Xbox original, and I'm trying to make it upgradable in the future, so it's not a one-time build. So the Xbox PC won't be stuck with whatever hardware it has. Basically, I wanted to print a custom IO shield. Originally, I was going to go for something like this, a bunch of arches for the vent hole right here, but the printer couldn't print them very well. It's very dirty, a lot of leakage, and a lot of problems. So I just went ahead with something simple with a bunch of squares, which the printer can handle pretty well like that. Here we have a power supply. That's a power supply fan. That's a power supply plug. And it's going to be a low profile 1050 Ti. That's the plan, but now they're very expensive, so maybe I'll wait for the next generation. I do have some small graphics cards that are going to fit in this system. And of course, right in the center here, we have the IO shield cover. So it took me 3 times to print this thing and a bunch of prototypes. And I did use Tinkercad to design this. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. It's a nice, awesome web-based program that you can actually use to design your own 3D printable models, which is pretty fun to use and pretty easy to make, and I really enjoyed using that website. Again, it is called Tinkercad, and that's how I got my results right here. So the IO shield finally fits in perfectly right here, and yeah, look forward for this project on my other channel, Kommando. And finally, here's a sample of the rafts that I have printed. I believe this was for the lemon squeezer right here. And here's how clean the lines look here. So you can see that the trend here is that straight lines are very clean, and anything with variation will most likely result in some jagged edges. Here's another sample of a raft with the red MS3D filament. And this one was actually for my soldier right here. This was a failed print. It didn't have proper supports, and overall it just got destroyed. You can see how messy it is. Most of this lower half was actually just gone. You can see that his hand is just messed up. His face is messed up. His gun is messed up. He's a poor man. I'm gonna put him down. I don't know what I'm gonna do with him, but yeah, that's a failed print. And the next failed print that I had was a Game of Thrones Iron Throne. And of course, if you have ever tried to print one of these, you should never try to scale it down too much. And that's what I did here. I scaled down too much. I have tried to cut down the printing time by a whole lot by scaling it down, lowering the infill, and speeding up. And that's what you can end up with. A really messed up, catastrophic print. And I think I printed this with a raft. I don't know why. It was a big mess. And with all that, you can see that there's a ton of stringing, a ton of lost detail. And on the bottom right here, you can see there are a lot of gaps and patch holes. And all that right here is because I didn't have enough infill. So something you should learn from here. But here's a close-up of what it looks like. It looks like a decaying Iron Throne. So really, I can kind of paint this and make it look antique and old and kind of like a broken down Iron Throne, which would probably look pretty cool along with that ghost ship of a Banshee that floats. I think that is actually about it for pretty much everything that I have here. So those are my 3D prints. Here's what they look like. The printer seems to have some problems in some certain areas. It could be because of my settings. It wasn't as easy to get the settings right as it was on the CR10. Do I recommend this printer? I would say yes, I actually recommend this printer, and that is because it is really easy to get started, and there aren't much problems that you end up with if you get something like the CR10, pretty much any model of the CR10s, and that is because the CR10s, personally, I have had 4 of them. I had the CR10 original, I had the CR10S, the advanced model of the CR10, and the CR10 400 by 400 by 400 model, which prints pretty big, and they all had warped glass beds, which is a pain in the ass, I have to say that, to get started with, because if you have warped bed, you're gonna have a ton of problems calibrating the printer, and it's pretty much gonna make you want to pull your hair out until you get it right. And once you get it right, you definitely don't want to touch it, otherwise it will go out of calibration, and you have to spend another day or 2 or a week trying to get it right. Here's what that looks like. I'm currently cleaning up my room, but yeah, the printer here does come with a pre-installed awesome printing surface, which you do actually get another extra 3D printing sheet right here, which is a red one. The pre-installed one is a green one, and I cannot emphasize how awesome it is to get started in 3D printing when you have a proper printing surface. Basically, you don't even need to use glue stick. I just have a small layer. You can see that it's very fine on there. For my glue stick right there, it's an Elmer's glue. By being able to get started with a 3D printer right away and printing things and not having to worry about glue stick, not having to worry about a warped bed, simply being able to calibrate it and get started with it is simply awesome. And this printer is something that I definitely recommend if you're a beginner and not having to deal with problems like you would get on the ANET A8, A10, and the E10, as well as the CR10s with their warped beds. You can simply get started and you're good to go. I did find the version of Merlin right here, which is the software that is running pretty nice. But one thing you'll notice when turning on this printer is that the side fan right here will actually rattle around for about a minute or two until it stabilizes, and then it will spin normally. Basically, the fan here is kind of failing out of the box. I have experienced that with other printers like the E10, and I think one of my CR10s did have that, but there's nothing to be worried about. It will just spin out of control, make a lot of rattling noise until it stabilizes. But the software here is pretty nice. You don't have to refresh the software or turn this printer off and on when you insert an SD card. The SD card that it uses is actually a full-size one, so it will last longer. It does come with an 8GB SD card right here. And one thing that I do like about this software is when you're trying to print from an SD card, it will actually show you the latest saved files first. And you don't have to dig through letter by letter to find what you have printed. It is subjective on what you like, but I personally have enjoyed this more because when I want to print something, I already know what I want to print. I pretty much want to print the last thing that I have saved onto the SD card. Anyways guys, that's actually pretty much it for this video. It has been a long video. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I do know that I have recorded at least 15 minutes worth of footage. But yeah, these are my results. These are my 3D prints and how they look like. And overall, I do recommend this if you're a beginner with 3D printing and you just don't want to deal with a lot of headaches that come with more popular printers like the ANETs and the CR10s, which I do both like. But I'm definitely going to go and try to get these CR10s up and running again and make a simple video on how to deal with the warped beds. But yeah, that is all for this video. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Hope you have enjoyed the video. If helpful, if you did, hit the like button and subscribe for content like this. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, everyone.